It's Thursday, September 10th, and time for your Barbados Today Morning News Update. Third-time employees are expected to wait before they can seek severance payments could be further extended. Special Envoy to the Prime Minister on Investment and Financial Services, Professor Avinash Prasad, told the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association's third quarterly general meeting that consideration was also being given to lengthening the unemployment payment period. He explained that the proposed Barbados Economic and Sustainable Transformation Program, which is being designed to get employees in the tourism sector back to work, was still being developed, and if it is not ready before most of the severance payments are triggered, then the change may be necessary.
We are not looking to extend the layoff eligibility for severance, which has currently already been extended from 13 weeks to 22 weeks. We may amend the legislation to extend it by a week or so if there are logistical issues around getting this program in place at the right time. We are going to extend unemployment benefit, which is currently at 26 weeks, and probably going to extend that for a period of time. We're still working out how long that is. But that's just to make sure that anyone is not, through the period of getting people re-engaged, no one's falling through the cracks and their unemployment benefit has run out and they've not started their job again yet. So we are seriously thinking of extending unemployment benefit. We're not really thinking of extending severance by the eligibility period by any significant length of time, but we may end up having to do that by a week or two.
Officials are looking at the possibility of implementing a test before departure initiative with Heathrow Airport that could see travelers coming from London receiving a COVID-19 PCR test just prior to boarding their flight to Barbados. Tourism and International Transport Minister Senator Lisa Cummins made the disclosure following a query on why every traveler is not mandated to take a PCR test prior to boarding an aircraft to Barbados. Addressing the third quarterly BHTA general meeting yesterday, Cummins said her ministry has been having regular meetings with airline partners and other stakeholders to find ways of limiting transmission of the COVID-19 illness during travel.
Aside from the PCR testing and aside from the efforts being made here in the ministry, we will be having, I believe, either Tuesday or Wednesday, a meeting to which your secretary representatives are also being invited, where we will be meeting with Heathrow International's leadership. I have reached out to Heathrow International. We have had a good preliminary meeting with their leadership and with their COVID response task force, and they are working with us to pilot a model which has already been implemented, as you may have seen in the press publicly, with the UAE, where they have a facility on site at Heathrow International. You know that there is airlift coming out of Heathrow on British Airways, and we're looking to see if we can collaborate with them to have that testing, rapid point of care testing, if it is so approved by our Ministry of Health and is consistent with the respective WHO standards at the point of origin.
The minister said this would address issues relating to confidence among potential travelers to Barbados.
If we are able successfully, Shane, to get this partnership with Heathrow and then roll it out with Gatwick, and then simultaneously we're also able to open opportunities to partner with the other gateways from which visitors are arriving, then we would have hopefully what we expect to be something significant that gives confidence in travel to persons who are flying into Barbados.
All forms of transportation, including the state-run transport board, will be under the microscope as the COVID-19 monitoring unit continues its enforcement of protocols in an effort to curb the spread of the virus. Word of this from head of the unit, Ronald Chapman, who explained that the sector was being monitored more because of the volume of people that it deals with on a daily basis.
Our guys are on the road right now, and they will be looking at all public transportation. There is no There is no attempt basically to go after private sector transportation. It is all transportation. What this meeting here is about is to demonstrate that there's an alliance between us and the public transportation. I wouldn't say there's an increased vigilance. There is vigilance across the entire island on all sectors. I'm sure that the persons who have bars and so on would probably say the same thing right now, that there's increased vigilance on them. And there are some places of worship that would say the same thing. It isn't everything that that gets out into the media, but what I would want to say is that the issue here is not so much the sectors, it is not so much the people. The issue here is prevention of the spread of the virus. And I don't want us to, I'm just going to step here a little bit. I don't want us to forget exactly why we're here. The issue here is not about just regulation. The issue is prevention of the spread of virus. And we prevent that spread of the virus by reducing persons' level of exposure. And if there is a sector, if there's an activity, if there's a behavior that increases exposure to this virus or potential exposure to this virus, it is important that the COVID-19 monitoring unit, as well as all the members of the Ministry of Health, Health and Wellness, work diligently to ensure that that exposure is reduced.
After months of negotiations, the government appears to be closing in on a deal that will break a 100-year monopoly held by the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited for the provision of energy. Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Kerry Simmons, disclosed that meetings have been taking place with BLNP's management to iron out legal and technical issues to bring negotiations to a close. He, however, did not give a definitive timeline for the wrap-up of negotiations.
We are working right now towards the democratization and the unbundling of the supply of energy in Barbados. It means breaking the 100-year-old monopoly that the Light and Power has enjoyed. I'm happy to say that the discussions are progressing in an amicable and I think a productive way. As recently as yesterday, I benefited from a conversation where we took stock between the CEO of the Barbados Light and Power, the PS in Energy, and myself for about a half hour on the phone as we try to identify how soon we can bring the negotiations to closure. The good news for Barbadians is that once we come to that point of closure, we will be looking at making sure that we have democratized the supply of energy in this country, and that every Barbadian will be in a position to be able to be an independent power producer, supplying energy onto the grid or supplying energy independent, so that the country now ceases to have this $500+ million of dependency every year in terms of our foreign exchange commitments to the importation of petroleum-related products.
There's regional and international news after this short break.
Barbados Today, news you can trust.
To news from the region, former Belize Prime Minister Said Musa to retire from active politics. The 75-year-old, who has spent some 40 years in the political arena, is the first Prime Minister to be elected for 2 consecutive terms since the country became independent in 1981. He is also the People's United Party's area representative for Fort George for more than 2 decades. More in this report from News 5.
Musa is a gargantuan public figure who began his political career pre-independence and fought and won many battles along the way, showing the strength and upside of a man who has dominated political life for decades. He represented the Fort George Division for 10 terms and held various portfolios such as sports, education, economic development, attorney general, and foreign affairs. Musa announced his departure from political life on Tuesday. The two-time Prime Minister suffered a stroke in May, from which he is still recovering.
This was a personal decision by the former party leader and Prime Minister. As we all know, in May he had an unfortunate health issue. He had a slight stroke. And so he has been having, he has not gotten to his old self. And he has improved considerably. As you saw in the pictures yesterday, he looks a lot stronger. But I think he felt that it is time for him to retire, not to resign from electoral politics.
And finally, UN Chief Antonio Guterres said that the world remains far off track to meet the objective of the Paris Agreement to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. At a joint press conference with the head of the World Meteorological Organization, Guterres stated that the world has witnessed devastating wildfires, floods and droughts, and warned that these challenges will get worse.
Consequences of our failure to get to grips with the climate emergency everywhere. Record heat waves, devastating wildfires, floods and droughts. And these challenges are only going to get worse. As this report emphasizes, because of past emissions, we are locked into further heating. There is no time to delay if we are to slow the trend and limit temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Climate action is the only way to ensure a livable planet for these and future generations. Whether we are tackling a pandemic or the climate crisis, it is clear that we need science, solidarity, and decisive solutions. We have a choice: business as usual, leading to further calamity, or we can use the recovery from COVID-19 to provide a real opportunity to put the world on a sustainable path.
That's news. But for the very latest, visit us at www.barbadostoday.bb. You can also subscribe to our e-paper, email updates, or like us on Facebook, and sign up for our breaking news alerts via WhatsApp. We're also on Izumi Media in bus terminals, as well as screenplay at supermarkets and gas stations near you. And you can also hear us on Mix 96.9 FM and Capital Media HD 99.3 FM.